right, please join me in welcoming to the stage pro climber, Alex Honnold. What's up, Alex? I think you're the first person on the stage today that's not an AI podcaster, founder, investor. Congrats. You're not, this is not AI Alex, right? This is real deal Alex?
I think so. I might be, am I the only college dropout here too? But I feel like in a tech crowd, it might not be true.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah.
It's really good to have you here. You know, we've been hearing a lot from AI tech founders and investors today, which has been awesome. And we're excited to get kind of a fresh perspective from you, especially related to setting big goals and taking risks. You know, you're obviously a pro climber, but you're also a founder of a foundation, you're an author, you're a podcast host, dad to 2 girls, and we're gonna talk about a lot of that. And actually, if any of you have questions for Alex, we are gonna be doing audience Q&A. One way that you can ask questions is through the QR code on the back of your badge. You can scan that, it'll bring you to a page where you can post a question, or you can upvote a question. So get those in, and we're gonna hit on those partway through the session. Probably where I'd like to start is really from the beginning. You know, you didn't just walk up to LCAP one day and climb it. Like, maybe bring us like way back to how'd you get your start in climbing? What was the inspiration?
Yeah, sure. It's definitely a long journey to get to LCAP. Yes. I mean, I think I started as a little kid. I just loved climbing on things. So I climbed trees and buildings and things like that. And then when I was 10 years old, I was lucky enough, my parents read about a climbing gym opening in my hometown. I'm from Sacramento, California. And so just by sheer good fortune, a climbing gym opened kind of down the road from me. And so my parents took me to the gym because they thought that'd be a safer outlet for all the things that I was climbing on anyway. Joke's on them because, you know, but so then I wound up going to the climbing gym for basically the rest of my life. I was at the climbing gym a couple hours ago. So 30 years later, I'm still going hard. Nice.
Was there a point where you said, hey, I can make this climbing thing a career?
No, basically there was. I mean, that was a slow journey as well, because especially when I was a kid growing up in the climbing gym, there just wasn't an avenue to being a professional climber. The industry was much smaller. Climbing was way more niche. Actually, out of curiosity, how many of you guys climb? Does anyone here climb?
We got a few climbers.
Yeah, cool.
Nice.
Yeah. And how many of you guys have kids that climb, or like have been to a climbing gym or gone to a birthday party or something? Because nowadays, like, everybody has had some interaction with the climbing gym. But when I was growing up, it was way more niche, way more fringe. You know, there's one gym on the wrong side of town in the wrong part of, you know, it's like all kind of right. Seedy feeling. Yeah, you go to some warehouse like in the boonies, and you're like, oh, this is kind of sketchy. But then once you climb, you're like, this is amazing. And so, you know, as a kid, I didn't really think that you could be a climber per se, but I just loved climbing. And so, I dropped out after a year of university. I decided to take a semester off and go rock climbing more. And so now I'm like 20 years into my hiatus. It's going well. But at the time, I kind of thought I was just going to climb for a little bit, see what happened, and then it kind of snowballed where I started slowly getting some free gear, and then a little bit of gas money, and then some companies gave me a little more gear, and then eventually I was kind of making a living, and then I was like, well, you know, I can keep prolonging this, like I get to just keep climbing. And now, you know, parts of the industry has grown, and now I'm a professional climber, or whatever that means, but I still get to climb full time.
Nice. You were studying engineering at Berkeley, right?
I was, but I would have been a terrible engineer.
I don't know. I'm sure there's some folks here who
I don't know. I'm going to hired you. This.
Yeah.
These are the folks that didn't drop out of school. I'm going to bet.
So after that year at Berkeley, where you're like, yeah, that's a riskier route. I'm actually going to decide to be a professional climber. At least give it a go.
Well, that's actually the thing, is it's not like I decided I'm going to be a climber. Yeah. Because at the time, I really was just taking a semester off. That year, I'd qualified for youth internationals, like international competition. So I was kind of like, oh, I'll take a semester off. I'll go to Youth Worlds. I'll travel around Europe and climb a little bit, and then I'll go back to school. And actually, my father had died that summer, and so it took a little bit of pressure off going to school. Not so much that he'd been overtly pressuring me to go to college, but it was just sort of the family expectation, like, of course you're going to get a college degree, and then you'll have some nice job or whatever. And so, you know, it kind of made me, you know, I was like, oh, I hated engineering. Like, I just wasn't. I was spending all my time walking to this nearby rock to go climbing anyway. And so I was like, oh, I'll just try something else for a little while. And then I just never went back. I just kept climbing.
There's plenty of people who maybe have followed that path and they decide to become a pro rock climber, but they climb with ropes. Somewhere along the way, you decided to focus more on free soloing, which is more of a niche within climbing. Like what spurred that?
So even that was never as clear of a distinction. It's not like, oh, I was into rock climbing and then I got into free soloing instead. Mm-hmm. Free soloing has always been a category within climbing. You know, there's bouldering, there's gym climbing, there's sport climbing. There are all these different ways to go rock climbing. And I've always been interested in all of them. You know, sometimes I climb mountains, sometimes I hike a bunch. Like every aspect of mountain climbing is interesting to me to some extent. And free soloing is one of those styles. And so starting at maybe age 18 or 19, when I was old enough to sort of drive myself to the mountains, I started dabbling in free soloing a little bit. And there are some practical sides to it where you just don't need a partner. And I was growing up in a suburban Sacramento. There wasn't like a big climbing scene. And so I didn't know that many people that rock climbed. And so, you know, if you're a 19-year-old living out of your van that wants to go climbing on a Tuesday morning, you're kind of like, oh, I can either go by myself and go soloing, or, well, that was like before I had a phone even. So I just went by myself and went soloing. You know, it's like there's no easy way to find partners and to find that community and everything. But so it's not as if I decided now I'm going to be a free soloist. It was just that sometimes it made more sense to climb without a rope. Most of the time I climb with a rope. And now I would say the free soloing represents more of my special occasions, sort of like my Super Bowl or something. You know, a few times a year I do things that I'm proud of that are challenging for me. But most of the time I'm training, I'm climbing with partners. You know, like today I was at a bouldering gym like over there. You know, it's like 10 blocks away. It's completely safe, pretty fun, climbed with a couple random kids and like had a nice session. But totally safe. It's like the opposite of free soloing. But great day.
From that point in your life, what was your path to Yosemite other than living close by? Yeah, was Yosemite always kind of your climbing home base?
Yeah, how many people have been to Yosemite? Oh, cool. That's amazing. So, I mean, you know how impressive it is. And so I think even for non-climbers, you go into Yosemite and you're struck by the grandeur, the awe, the immensity of it. I mean, it's so inspiring. And so for climbers, there's all that. Plus, it kind of has a singular place in climbing history in that a couple of the walls in Yosemite were the first and biggest walls of their size to be climbed in the 1950s and 60s. And so basically, there's tons of climbing history sort of etched on the walls of Yosemite. And so for me, you know, it was that double inspiration. I mean, I grew up near there. So as a kid, I actually did field trip to Yosemite for 5 days, just part of our normal, public school education. We were like, oh, we're going to Yosemite to camp and, you know, admire the beautiful rocks. And so then revisiting it as a climber later, I was like, this is so inspiring. And so then every season I would return to Yosemite in the spring and the fall. I was living in a van for 10 or 12 years, basically traveling the West full time. And so every year I'd be in Yosemite for at least 3 months trying to do projects, both in the climbing season, spring and fall. And the beauty of Yosemite is that there's always something bigger and harder to try. So each season you can do something that pushes you to your absolute limit, and then you come back the next season and do something that's just a little bit harder. You know, it's like as soon as you've done something, there's always something a little bigger. You can try to do it faster. You can try to do it. So the first time I climbed LCAP, just climbing LCAP felt like a monumental achievement. You know, it's like because it's such a big wall. So
I would say it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, you know, I was a beginner climber basically, and I was like learning how to climb big walls, and so just getting up the wall felt incredible. And then to free climb LCAP, which free climbing means using a rope still. Free soloing is climbing without a rope. It's a subtle distinction. But so the first time I free climbed LCAP, that also felt like a huge milestone, and then climbing in a day, and then free climbing in a day, and then eventually leading up to free soloing it. But it basically meant that every season for 15 years, I had something to challenge myself on in the walls in Yosemite.
You had then climbed LCAP, you know, you basically lived in its shadow for quite a while. At what point did you say, hey, I think I can free solo LCAP? Like, yeah, what was the origination of the idea?
Well, actually, so in 2008, I free soloed Half Dome, which is a 2,000-foot wall on the other end of Yosemite. Mm-hmm. And so starting the next year, I was kind of like, oh, I'm going to free solo LCAP. That's like the next obvious thing. It's also the history, like both walls were climbed in that order historically. Like first people climbed Half Dome, then they climbed LCAP. It sort of represented the next obvious step. So I was like, that's what I'm going to solo next. But then in 2009, I came into Yosemite, I looked at LCAP, and I was like, there's no way. It's so daunting, it's so intimidating, it's so big. And so for the next 6 years, I guess, it was always sort of on my to-do list, like this is the year I'm going to free solo LCAP. And then I would drive in, I'd see LCAP. It's the first thing you see as you drive in. And I'd be like, this is not the year I'm going to free solo LCAP. Like, this is totally out of the question. And so it took, I guess, 6 years before I finally thought, maybe it is possible to free solo LCAP. Like, maybe I can actually do this. And also at that point, I sort of realized that it was never going to look easy, that, it now had been 6 years of driving it, and that's 2 times per year, like spring and fall. So basically it'd been 12 times that I'd driven into Yosemite, looked at the wall and been like, no way. And so I guess it took 12 times, but I finally learned that it was never going to look easy. Like I'd kind of been hoping that at some point I would get good enough somehow, or somehow I don't know, something would change and it would just look casual. And I was like, it's never going to look casual. And at the same time, I was almost 30 at the time, and I was kind of like, this is a life dream. It's something I want to do in my life. It's never going to be easy. At some point, I need to just start putting the work in and trying.
Yeah.
And so, by happy coincidence, that's actually when the makers of the film Free Solo, the documentary, they approached me about doing a feature film of some kind. They didn't know anything about LCAP, but I was kind of like, oh, perfect timing, because I'm ready to finally try to commit to this life project that I want to work on, and having basically a team fall into place like that, basically people who are there to help you work on a life project. I was like, perfect timing. And so then we spent the next 2 years working on the climb and making the film.
You put a huge amount of prep into this climb. I think this video clip sums it up fairly well. If you want to show the notebook prep clip.
I need to dial it in so much that it doesn't matter if there's a stadium of people watching me, because it's so easy for me that I'm just like, check this out, and just do it. Pitch 1 is stay left towards the top splitter, feels more secure. Pitch 2, trust right foot, rock on, trust the feet, right hand to the last undercling. 8, easy romp, go fast. And 9, stay outside with the down climb, careful of blocks. Pitch 26, so lie back and up the corner, key left hand pinch thing, right foot back step on a little edge, left foot pace against the wall, stand up. Left hand to the huge ear jug thing, switch the feet, match the big jug, left foot jams into the crack. Then you see right hand down pulling on the top part of the jug, left hand goes into this flared slot thing, which you can either fist jam or hand jam. Either way, it's like a flare jam in the slot. Sag down onto it, right hand crosses under to an undercling side pull, right foot sinks low to a flat edge, left foot steps through to an edge, right foot back steps really high so you can sag your weight around the corner without having to swing. Left foot out to the big horn, right hand through to a little finger pocket. You go left foot out to an edge around the corner. You can actually push all the way into the corner. Then you can grab this down pulling right hand, flat, small crimp. Left hand to the other undercling, switch your feet on the rail, and then just reach through the jugs, and then you're just done. The key thing for the crux, pull hard, trust feet, trust, underline, double exclamation point, period. Autopilot, period.
It's good to see you keeping your van tidy. Is that an important part of the prep?
Oh yeah, always. I mean, when you live in a really small space, you do keep it pretty clean.
Nice. How do you think about, clearly a lot of physical prep going on there. Did you think about it in terms of the physical prep and the mental prep?
Yeah, they went hand in hand. The physical prep is slightly easier or more obvious in a lot of ways. It's hard work, obviously, you're training. That clip showed, hanging on the hangboard, isolating your fingers, training. But physical strength is relatively straightforward. This is the same as training for a marathon or whatever else. It's challenging, but it's pretty straightforward. If you do the work, you will get better. Your muscles get stronger, whatever. You can do the thing. Mm-hmm. I think the mental side of it and the sort of psychological preparation was much more unknown, and that was definitely harder, just because you don't know what it takes to have the confidence to do something that hasn't been done before, that you haven't done before. Mm-hmm. You're kind of like, well, I think I feel good about this, but do I? You never really know until you actually try. So, that was the real challenge.
Did knowing you'd have cameras on you, did that change your mindset?
Yeah, actually, I think in some ways I wound up doing more preparation than I maybe would have without the cameras, which in retrospect I think made the experience actually better for me, because I was kind of over-prepared. For those, have you guys seen Free Solo? Have many people seen it? Some people have? Okay. Well, those that haven't, don't need to, because you know the ending. I made it. Yeah. Great success.
You're sitting here.
Yeah, it's like, who cares? Save yourself an hour and a half. But, no, so what are we talking about? Preparation?
Cameras on
the cameras, yeah. So, I think for those that have seen the film, I have a failed attempt, my first attempt. I climbed partway up, and then I kind of give up. And I sort of suspect that if the cameras hadn't been there, I maybe would have just sort of pushed through and sort of eked it out. And I've definitely done a handful of solos just by myself, like real solos over the years where I'm just by myself. And it doesn't go perfectly, but you just kind of make it work because you just want to get it done. And I don't know, like I sold this wall a long time ago that there's no footage of, there's no film, like there's nobody there. But I drove into the middle of freaking nowhere in the Southern Sierra in California to solo this route. And I spent a day working on it. And I worked on it quite a bit. I did all the prep. I had a sense of what I was going to do, but I was going to take a rest day and then work it for like 2 more days and then maybe do it. But my freaking van ran out of propane, so I couldn't really cook. And it was like a super long drive back into town. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to do the thing tomorrow so I can go back to town and get food. And, I was just kind of like, oh, I'll just kind of rush it. And I went up there, and it turns out it was really freaking scary. And I kind of just like eked it out. And obviously I should have prepared for 3 more days, but I just didn't quite want to drive back and forth and I've done that, on a handful of climbs, and I'm not encouraging that approach by any means, but I'm just saying that because the camera crew was there, I just didn't do anything like that. I really was methodical about the whole prep, and because it's kind of embarrassing to barely get away with something in front of people, because all the camera guys are my close friends, and they're all watching right there, and I didn't want to be all shaky and make them traumatized and make me traumatized, and it's all, it complicated the thing for sure, but I think for the better.
Even though many of you have seen the movie, I think the last couple pitches are pretty cool. So let's roll that clip of the climax of the climb.
It's over now. Oh God, it's done! Oh God! Oh God!
Oh my God, I can't believe what I just witnessed.
You made those last couple pitches look like a stroll in the park.
Yeah, and actually, I think that's what we were just talking about, the preparation with the film crew and everything. Yeah. I think part of the reason that the end of the route was so joyous for me was that the whole top, I did feel almost over-prepared, and it felt fun, it felt great. And so then at the top, we're all sort of celebrating. Like it was a super good experience, and it still remains one of my best climbing experiences. And I think that's a result of the effort that I put into it over 2 years of direct preparation and training with the film crew, but then the many years before that I've been kind of building up to it. It was a tremendous amount of effort, but then when it finally happened, I was like, oh, it feels pretty freaking good. I was glad that I put that much work into it because it made the actual experience feel terrific.
Yeah. It's such a huge feat, and I feel like it kind of overshadows a lot of what you've done since, but you've done some really cool adventures since. Like what's one of the adventures you're most proud of?
Yeah, I've done a lot of climbing since then that I'm proud of. But honestly, nobody cares, because the film won an Academy Award. It's like literally nothing I do in the future will ever win an Academy Award. I'm kind of like, that's fine. But in a lot of ways, though, that takes some pressure off feeling like I need to achieve anything in particular. I can just focus on the things that I'm interested in, the challenges that I think are interesting, and just push myself for my own sake. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I kind of wonder, I mean, especially with an audience like this, with tech community and sort of founding things, I do wonder if you have a really successful first company, you sell it, then you're sort of like, from here on out, I just work on whatever interests me. I do the things that I'm curious about. Because you just know you're never going to replicate that same level of success if something goes, like, if something far exceeds your wildest expectations, you're kind of like, well, I'll never do that again. Now I can just do the things that I think are cool, which I've been doing ever since then.
We have quite a few second founders here. Who's a second-time founder? So
Do you think you're going to exceed your previous bests? Anybody? Maybe. Nobody wants to say. At least one thinks they're going to outdo their
For the
first
Gradient
performance.
portfolio, we hope so.
Yeah.
Going for that. Why don't we take a couple questions from the audience right now, if you don't mind posting those up, and then we'll get back to a few more.
Cool.
See them there. You want to take the?
This is so high tech. I've never seen. But so I guess you guys have scanned the thing, and now they're on the screen. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But so the top question is from somebody who's anonymous in here. I mean, come on. You can at least say your name, really. But how do you maintain focus when the consequences are so high? Well, I kind of think that when the consequences are that high, it forces you to maintain focus. I mean, I think that the higher the consequences, the less likely you are for your attention to stray and wander. I mean, you're sort of like if you mess up, you're going to die. It's pretty easy to stay focused. It's not like you're thinking about other things. I don't know. I mean, but I'm kind of joking, but I'm sure you guys experience this in normal life too. Like if you're driving a windy road in heavy rain, it's like you are just focused. Or you're like driving in a blizzard. I think that driving is a common experience that we've probably all felt to some extent. Like if conditions are bad, you are totally focused. And hours can go by driving in a blizzard, and you're just like, oh, I'm doing the thing, I'm 100% focused. And then later you'll be like, man, I'm so tired because I was like in it for hours. But that's how the most intense climbing can be. I mean, slightly harder than driving, but same idea. So what's my second greatest talent after climbing? I'd like to think that it's being a dad, but it's probably not. I'm pretty into crosswording. I don't know, I like crossword puzzles.
Is it extreme crosswording?
No, it's the New York Times. I mean,
No?
that doesn't seem very extreme.
Okay.
No. No, I don't know. I do all mountain sports sort of poorly. I mountain bike, I ski, I do all the things that people do in mountains, but not really that well. But I do a lot of rock climbing. Should we just keep plowing through the?
Let's do a couple more, yeah, and then we'll get back to a couple.
Actually, I see this question.
questions.
Do it.
Yeah.
Oh, they're moving so quickly. This is so high tech. But somebody asked if I miss dirtbagging, like just living in the van, sort of the simple life, and now that I get recognized more. And actually, I still experience that quite a lot because most of the places that I climb outside, there just aren't any people. I live in Las Vegas, and there's tremendous climbing access. It's the best climbing in the country for those that. Has anyone ever actually done anything outdoors in Vegas? Everyone goes for conferences, but that's cool. You went outside. There's only one. But no, the outdoor access is insane, and the climbing is amazing. But there's never anybody there, and so I'm climbing outside maybe 3 days a week, and then sort of training in my home garage a couple days a week, just because I have 2 small kids now, so it's nice to spend more time at home and like taking kids to school and doing things, whatever. But yeah, I'm still climbing all the time. And it's not that different than my life was 10 years ago, except that I have a family and everything.
Yeah. I see a couple on here around managing fear. Why don't we get into that maybe a little bit deeper? And it's interesting, in all the movies I've seen you in, you're like the chill guy. And even your cameramen can be like anxious about what you're doing. But there must be something that gets you scared.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm scared of falling to my death, same as anybody else. I'm scared of injury. I'm scared of losing loved ones. I mean, I experience fear the same as anybody. I think that through climbing, though, I mean, I've basically spent 30 years getting scared all the time, or getting scared in small amounts all the time. And so I've just gotten a lot better at parsing out which fears are well-founded, which fears aren't, whether or not it matters, when to heed your fears, when to ignore them. I think I just have a much sort of deeper relationship with fear than maybe the average person. just because I think in normal life, it's easy to go for long periods of time without, well, maybe not without feeling fear, because a lot of people are afraid of things like, well, I might miss my flight, but you're kind of like, who cares that you miss your flight? You're just like, eat a sandwich and take the next one. It's like, it's all pretty casual. And so I think that something like climbing, where you face real consequences and you could die, helps put all those other things in perspective a little bit, where almost nothing else in life feels like that big of a deal.
Yeah.
If, as long as your health and sort of safety are okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, that's part of my whole relationship with fear, I think, is basically if you spend a lot of time truly being afraid for good reasons, like you could actually die, it just makes everything else seem so chill.
Was there any point when you were free soloing a route and you just froze, and you had to manage through it? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like literally a week and a half ago or something, I had a whole little mini experience soloing a thing in this like insane windstorm. I didn't think it'd be that windy. I mean, it was really windy when I hiked into the canyon. It was windy on the wall, but then it turns out in the middle of the wall, it was really windy. It was like too windy. And I basically got to a point where I couldn't continue because it was like insanely windy, and I wound up having to retreat off a thing, but not before I went through a whole existential crisis for a minute where I was like, what am I doing? This is terrible. But yeah, I mean, you occasionally go through, what is it, all the stages of grief, where you go through denial and bargaining and all the things. You're like, why am I doing this? I hate this. I'll never climb again. This is terrible. And then by the time you get back to the ground, you're like, it wasn't that windy. It was fine. It was okay. But no, I mean, I've had so many experiences like that. And obviously I try to avoid those, through preparation, through training, through all the things. You try to minimize that as much as possible. But that said, I mean, things happen. Like, obviously, you get scared sometimes. And sometimes things just don't go as planned. You go partway up something, and it turns out, it starts to rain. It starts to hail. Like, the rock quality is not as good as you thought it was, or whatever. I mean, things happen.
When you are planning a new project, a new route, like, how do you determine, okay, this is so risky that I need to do all this prep, versus I'm going to go up and on-site this route, and I should be good?
A lot of the time, you can just climb a route with a rope first and get. Actually, I just did this film project maybe 2 months ago, which I think might be in NDA still, but I don't know. Might be a thing. Whatever, we'll see.
We won't mention.
You might see a big film thing in a year and a half or something, whenever it comes out. But so I free soloed this wall in Jordan in the Middle East, and it was pretty cool, nice rock quality, and it's something I'd wanted to do, but I wasn't sure if I could do it. I hadn't been there in 15 years, and I hadn't climbed the route in 15 years, and I was hoping that it was something that I'd be able to solo for this film project, but I didn't really know until I showed up and tried it again. And so my first day in country, I climbed the route with my friend with a rope, all safe. And as I climbed it, sort of thought about, could I imagine doing this without a rope? Mm-hmm. And as I went up it, there were no obvious red flags. There was nothing where I was like, this is out of the question. But there were a bunch of places where I was like, I don't know, this is kind of weird, or like, I don't like this foothold, or there are things that feel off balance or whatever. But then you have to rappel the route to get back down it in this particular case. So as we rappelled back down it, I spent a bunch more time trying all the things. And kind of by sheer good fortune, all the sections that I felt a little uncomfortable with all turned out to have easier methods. Like once I hung there on a rope and played with them a little bit, it turns out there'd be like some hold that I hadn't seen, or there was like a bigger foothold that I hadn't noticed, or there's a different way to position your body that felt more in balance and like less likely to slip. And so, as I went down the wall, I realized like, oh, actually this totally works. And so then I spent the next 4 days doing a little more prep. I marked a lot of the holds that I liked and just memorized sequences and tested some of the holds. It's kind of friable sandstone, so I didn't want anything to break. And then did it for the film thing. It's like, oh, it's great.
Nice.
Yeah.
I've heard you in interviews talk about your earlier climbing days, and you kind of had this mentality of being, you called yourself a tortured artist that had more angst when it came to climbing. Like, talk a little bit more about that, and does that still exist today? Like, do you think you have to be the tortured artist to do what you do?
Now I think that's kind of stupid. Yeah. I think I was just kind of a shy kid that was kind of, coming of age, you're kind of angstful, mm-hmm. You're all sort of dark. And I think part of that is just a cultural thing, is like romantic, it's cool. And I think that, especially in climbing culture, there's kind of this romantic notion of the like, especially with free soloing, there are tons of stories of like, angstful free soloing where people like break up with the girlfriend and then just go for it, and it's just like cool. And I think now it's kind of dumb. I'm like, I don't think that's that cool. And actually, so I've been with my wife now 10 years, and I think she really sort of challenged me on all that, where she's mm-hmm. like, why don't you just be happy and do all the same things? And I was kind of like, that is kind of nice. Like I can still do all the same climbs, but then just enjoy myself the whole time. I was kind of like, it is a very healthy outlook. It's like, why be all dark and tortured and conflicted if you don't need to be? Like there's nothing really wrong.
Why don't we go back to a couple of the audience questions? I think the top one might be relevant to this topic.
You've accomplished so much literally and figuratively at the top. Does the concept of imposter syndrome resonate with you? Do you experience that feeling today? I mean, that's an interesting question. Actually, I'm going to tie it in with a question 2 down, which is, did the kids at the gym today know who they were climbing with? And so interestingly, in any climbing gym you go to in the country, there's always going to be some 10-year-old who's better than you. Like for anybody, for me, for the world's best climbers, they can show up at any random gym, and there's always like some 14-year-old, some 16-year-old who's basically better than them at whatever is in that particular gym. And that's just kind of the nature. It's kind of the nature of gym climbing. And even for the world's best climbers, that might not be totally true. But there's just always somebody better than you at some aspect of climbing. And gyms set all kinds of weird kind of competition style settings. So like the problems they put up in the gym sort of favor particular styles for kids. Anyway, so today I was climbing with these 2 16-year-old kids in the gym. And they're both going to nationals in a couple weeks. I saw one of them wearing like a USA climbing shirt. So I was kind of like, oh, this is like a good youth competitor. And they definitely knew who they were climbing with. It turns out that both of them had gotten into climbing because they'd seen free solo as 8-year-olds. And I was like, God, that makes me feel old. I was like, that's weird. And one of them apparently had met me as like a 9-year-old in a gym across town and said that I'd given him some mantra, which he had now forgotten because he was 9 at the time or whatever. Anyway, but so I had a great time climbing with them. But in terms of imposter syndrome, I mean, I think everybody experiences that to some extent, because I can show up in a gym and people are like, you're the best climber in the world. I probably am the most well-known climber in the world. I'm far from the best, but I probably, because of the success of the film and because of whatever else, like everyone knows you and they expect you to be amazing. And you're sort of like, well, this little kid is like for sure better than me at a lot of things. I mean, they might not be a better all-around rock climber because obviously they don't have experience. Like they've literally never gone outside before because they can't drive yet. But so it's not like they're just better than me all the way around. But you're kind of like, at specific aspects of climbing, they are much better. And so I think, I don't know if that's imposter syndrome or not, but it's just a good reminder that no matter how good you get at certain things, there's always some random little kid that's way better at a lot of other things. So you're kind of like, you just keep trying your best. I did manage to do one of the problems before both of them, and I was very proud of myself. We were doing sort of like trick style like competition problems, which for somebody like me who mostly climbs outside feels very, very different than what I'm used to. And so I was kind of like, oh, I'm just going to like play with these kids and try something new. And then I actually did it. I was so pleased with myself.
Keeping up with the 16-year-olds. How about that question at the top there? Managing
advice
risk.
for founders on managing risk in a measured way. I don't know. That's an interesting question, because I think for me it's maybe easier to evaluate risk, because I think with physical risk taking, where your life is on the line, there's just a much more obvious sort of fear response and sort of like a gut feeling around it. I mean, I suspect that, I don't know anything about business or founding a company, but I suspect that it's harder to evaluate the risks, where you might not feel that same like overt fear or dread, or maybe you do. I don't know. Do you feel like sickeningly scared if things are going sideways? I see a few nods. Yeah. So apparently some people at least are experiencing that same feeling, like deep visceral fear. But I suspect that managing risk in a business sense has a little more to do with numbers and sort of percentages, and you can probably figure out risk more. I think with climbing, you just basically practice, you just prepare until it doesn't seem that scary anymore. Because with LCAP in particular, I'd look at the wall and I was just like, this is out of the question. And then I finally had a season where I looked at it and I was like, maybe I can at least start putting the work in and finding out. And then after I did 2 years of work, I finally looked up at the wall and was like, this is like, it looked fun. I looked up and I was like, I can do this. This will be incredible. And the thing is, now if I go back to Yosemite and I look at LCAP, I think that's a really big wall. Like, now I know that I have free soloed it, so it is possible. But if I look at it, I'm sort of like, oh, geez, like that's not something I could do right now. Or if somebody had a gun to my head, like, 50-50, I'd probably, or maybe 75. I mostly remember I probably could. I feel like just as fit as then, but I just don't. It's not as current. But you're kind of like, at that moment though, I felt like it was 100%. Where I'm like, I am locked in. I've been devoted to this. I've been training. It's like I am ready for this. And so I think, preparation is what make risk feel like possible.
It's good advice. I think this next one on risk is a good one. Do you think people generally overestimate or underestimate risk, and why?
That's an interesting question. I mean, my personal take, I've spoken to a handful of business audiences and things like that, and founders and things. And my general feeling is that people sort of overestimate risk because people are always sort of like, oh, it's business, it's so risky. And I'm kind of like, but even if your business fails, your kid's still going to go to private school, you're doing fine. Like it's, like you're not going to be hungry, you're not going to get hurt. I mean, maybe, depending on this. In general, though, life's going to be fine. You're going to start another business, or you can always go back to your old job working for Google or whatever. It's like, so, I think that, well, I don't know.
True. Yeah.
But basically, I feel like a lot of time people make something feel riskier than it needs to be because the reputational side of it or whatever. They're just like, I don't want to fail. I'm afraid of like failing in this thing that I'm doing. But you're kind of like, who cares? If it all falls apart, try again in a couple years. Like learn from it, move on. It's not like you're actually going to be. I mean, you guys don't execute people when their business fails, do you? That's like
Not generally.
yeah, okay. Yeah, occasionally.
Yeah. Google frowns upon that.
Yeah, people don't hit their numbers and you just freaking drag them out back. You're like, you're done.
Yeah.
I don't know. So, I mean, I think that it's pretty uncommon in normal life to face real risks where you could die. And I think that those are the times where you really have to heed the risk. Like you should pay attention to those things. But the rest of the time, take some chances. You only live once. Like you may as well use it.
Yeah. I think this next question is a good one to close out on this topic. So what was your closest experience to failure, i.e. death? Describe the experience, your thoughts through it, and how you eventually overcame it.
Well, this is an interesting thing because if you talk about failure in rock climbing, that's actually kind of... So, I mean, in rock climbing, you fail all the time because as a climber, you typically are working on a project. So I spent the last month or sort of 5 weeks working on a particular route near my home. Then I was using a rope. It's like a roped climb. It's totally safe. And I would basically go up and I'd try it and I'd fall off it and, that's how I'd fail. So I spent 5 weeks failing on the same route. And I had my last try on it 2 days ago for the season before I'm leaving for the season and it's starting to get too hot at that particular cliff and whatever. And I failed on it again. I was like, God damn it. I kind of thought I might be able to eke it out before the season ended because I felt good, but I just didn't. And so, but I'll be back in the fall and hopefully I'll do it then. And not that it really matters. Like it's just a personal goal of mine to do this route, which I think might be one of the hardest routes I've ever tried, but you just never really know until you do it. Mm-hmm. And so as a climber, you're basically failing all the time, right up until the one time that you succeed in the thing that you were working on. And then you immediately move on to the next project because that's just how climbing kind of works. And so, like with LCAP, let's say, I spent 6 years thinking about it and sort of dreaming about it. I spent 2 years training for it. And then I spent 4 hours actually climbing it, or 356, a little under 4 hours. And so, I'm kind of like, I basically spent 8 years like sort of failing or working towards a thing. And then I only spent 4 hours actually having the experience of climbing it. And so you spend the vast majority of your time either failing or working towards something, and then you spend a tiny, tiny amount of your time actually sort of succeeding in the thing that you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And so, anyway, all that to say, I mean, if you don't love the whole process, I mean, it's kind of cliche, but it's like, I just like going climbing every day, and most of that time is spent failing, and then occasionally you get to do something that you're proud of. And when and you never really know exactly when those days are going to happen. And so you just have to show up every freaking day doing the thing. And then every once in a while, you're like, what a great day. Just play it out.
It's good advice. Similar to running a startup.
Yeah, I mean, because there's just so many factors outside of your control. It's like all you can really do is show up and do the work and do the thing nonstop. And then, hopefully it'll come together at some point. But you can't totally anticipate when that's going to happen.
Yeah. I want to give you a chance to talk about your foundation. You started the Honnold Foundation when you were in your 20s. Can you discuss why you started and what causes your support?
Yeah, so the Honnold Foundation supports community solar projects around the world. And I basically started it because I was living in my van. I suddenly started making a little more than I felt like I needed. My overhead was very low because living in a van and rock climbing full time is pretty chill. And so I started earning more, and so I started giving a third of my income to these community solar projects around the world. And so it's been maybe 12 or 13 years now, and we're still doing the same things. This year, I think we'll give a couple $1 million to projects around the world. It's like, I think in 30 different countries now.
Wow. How do you choose the projects?
All right, thanks. Well, so when I started the Honnold Foundation, I literally just Googled it. I just looked up, like what are some, I was looking for environmental projects that supported human well-being in some way, like anything that helped the environment and also helped people. And that was often a solar project. And so I was just donating money directly to various nonprofits to support that kind of work. Now the Honnold Foundation takes we have an open call for grant applications from around the world. So we get hundreds of applications and then we basically vet the best projects. And like I said, we'll probably give maybe $3 million in grants this year. But we have something like a $50 million pipeline of vetted projects that are viable, that work, that would be great. But we just, rock climbing doesn't earn that much. And if it's not tech money. And so yeah, we just give what we can and basically give it all away every year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You are a brand, Alex Honnold. Like, how do you think of the brand of Alex? I think you are. I think so. You have a podcast, Climbing Gold, and you've written a book. Like, how do you think about the business side of Alex Honnold?
Oh, I try not to.
All right.
I have an agent that deals with that side of it.
Yeah.
I think that the important thing is just being a good rock climber. It's like, I still, first and foremost, I'm a professional rock climber. I care about my performance as a climber. That's why I was so psyched to burn off those 16-year-olds in the gym today. I was like, look at that, still got it, so psyched. No, I just think that to be a professional climber, you have to be able to do hard things in climbing. Like, and that's kind of, you can't fake that. Like, you hike to some big wall outside some cliff, and you have to be able to do something that people haven't done on it before, or come up with the interesting ideas. Like, you don't have to be the best necessarily, but you have to be a great climber first and foremost. And to me, that's always been the most important thing. I think of all the work that I do through my foundation and now like with a podcast and other things that I do, I think of that all as stuff that I try to do on rest days. And then climbing is the important thing. But the thing is, rest days, you do have a fair amount of time. You may as well spend it, hosting a podcast or like doing events or doing whatever. But the climbing days are the most important thing for sure.
We have time for a couple more audience questions. Any of those strike you?
I don't know. What do you think? I'm sort of like, nah. I feel like you guys could do better. Somebody can surely just get a couple more.
Keep it going.
Somebody asked about, actually one right above that was, is free solo still driven by the same motivations, like not having partners and things like that? And yeah, actually there is still some degree of soloing it's just easy, especially with kids. Kind of like, oh, I have 3 hours. I can go to the mountains, do a thing, run down, be home, and like have a nice little dose of adventure. And so I still do some amount of soloing like that. But in general, I think that when I was younger, I did a lot of easy soloing, like a tremendous amount of volume, because I was kind of learning about it and learning how to solo and learning all that. Now, as more of an adult, I don't feel like I need that quite as much. I don't need to take the risk, because even though it feels totally safe if you're doing it well, there is obviously the reality that things happen sometimes, like holds can unexpectedly break, or, and I've had plenty of near misses over the years where like something happened. And when those kinds of things happen, like a rock breaks off and you're sort of like, well, I didn't fall, so it was okay. But one day, you could fall off because something breaks. I've had a handful of times where like rocks have peeled back and I've kind of like shoved them into place and like kept my balance and been like, whoa. And then, and it's interesting because you get that whole spike of adrenaline where you're like, oh my God, that's so scary. But by the time you realize what's happened, it's already in the past and you're fine. And so you're kind of like, well, deep breath, back to what I was doing. But now with a slightly better understanding of the rock quality, where you're like, oh, like maybe don't trust some of these holds quite as much. But anyway, so I still solo a bit like that. But I think in general, I try to make it count more. Like I was talking about earlier, like this film project I did a couple months ago where, it's like something I'm doing for like a work thing, for a cool film and a route that I'm proud of and a place that I'm excited about. And I'm sort of like making it all count in a way that seems more worth it. But
now that you have kids, any discussion with your wife around, should I solo this or not?
A little bit, yeah. I think for those that have seen the film Free Solo, I think I have a slightly callous seeming approach in that, where I just don't value her opinion at all. And no, but to be fair, so I actually met her at exactly the same time that we started working on the film. And so I'd already had this dream of doing this thing for 6 years. And I was deep into this sort of quest to free solo LCAP. And I met her and I was like, oh, she's amazing and this is a great relationship. But obviously I'm going to choose my long-term life dream over this cool new girlfriend. It's like obviously. Now it's a little different because now we've been together 10 years and I don't have any other big life dreams sort of queued up. And so now I do talk to her about, I mean, I would say that my wife probably has a better understanding of risk and all the subtlety involved in this type of stuff. Like she probably gets it better than anybody. Just because, I mean, we've been living together and talking about it for a decade now.
Yeah.
So she definitely weighs in on some projects where, like the film project I was just talking about, she was like, oh, that's cool. That's a cool opportunity. You get to work with all your friends, do something you'll be proud of. It looks amazing. But then, you know, I have some other goals that I talked to her about, and she's like, that sounds stupid. You shouldn't do that. And I'm kind of like, we'll see. You know, maybe I will eventually, but I, you know, I don't push all the time.
Yep. Relevant question here. What do you say when your kids tell you they want a free solo LCAP years from now?
I tell them if they put, you know, 30 years of practice into it and they feel good about it, then who am I to tell them not to? But at the same time, you know, it's a long path to get there. And if they want to take that path, then like they'll know. You know, it's like, it's not something that you just decide, I'm going to do this thing and then walk up. You're just not able to do it unless you've devoted this entire long journey to it.
Yep.
And so, you know, I mean, we'll see. My kids for sure are going to grow up hiking and scrambling and being in the mountains just because that's what we do as a family all the time. And so if they wind up getting into climbing, then that's great and I'll support that. But I would never encourage a child to free solo. But that said, I'm not going to discourage a kid from having adventures in nature. And if they eventually build enough skill to feel comfortable doing something like that, then I'm kind of like, I'm not going to stop them. But I'm going to make sure that they are good at what they do.
Last question, how are you using AI today?
Dude, honestly, I'm a bit of an AI nut. I'm a late adopter to all things technological. But I recently wrote a foreword for another climber's book, and I used AI to write like a little bio for the person because I was having a hard time pulling together some timeline things because he's been climbing since the 70s and he's done all kinds of big things in Europe in the 80s and 90s. And anyway, so I read this AI generated bio of him and I was like, I don't know if that's right. And then I had AI write a bio of myself for me, and I was like, well, that's definitely not right. I had all kinds of weird things. And so then I was like, oh, geez. So then I just went back to just trying to figure it all out myself. I was kind of like, I'd say.
Nice. All right. Big thanks to Alex. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Great job. Really appreciate you coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.